Professor Kohn, thank you for seeing us today. It's very nice to meet you. You got the prize in chemistry, 1998. And that was quite a number of years after you did your remarkable discovery. How have you dealt with this prize, this award, and how has it affected your life?
I'll answer this in two parts. I mean, one is simply how has receiving the Nobel Prize affected my life, and the other one is, the second part is how has the fact that I've suddenly been transformed into a chemist affected my life. Well, it's in both cases really very positive. As far as the first half of your question is concerned, I think most of my colleagues who have received the Nobel Prize have probably had the similar experience. The fact that you received the Nobel Prize suddenly means that, broadly speaking, people take you more seriously suddenly. And that means that if one has some principles, some convictions, and is not totally satisfied with the world as it is, one now has, let me first say, an opportunity, but really in a certain sense a responsibility to do something with this, not to let it be. I mean, whether one's concern is, for example, as an American, I'm very concerned about the fact that here's the leading country in the world, but look at its health system. So the health system is, on the one hand, in many areas, the best in the world. On the other hand, if you look at the fraction of people, including millions of children, who are getting very poor, sometimes no health care, it's shocking. So, as an example of something that I felt very upset about for many years.
Do you speak out on that
Yes,
issue?
now I speak out on it, and the same about several other areas that concern me.
I know during your speech 98 you said that, for example, working for peace is something of importance.
Yes, and I continue to do this quite actively. I'll just mention something very concrete. I'm a research professor at the University of California, the Santa Barbara campus, and the University of California has been managing the two nuclear weapons laboratories in America. I think I'm correct in saying that every advance in the effectiveness of nuclear weapons, and one has to stop for a moment and ask oneself whether the word advance is the appropriate word, was done under the management of the University of California. It's my university. It bothers me a lot. And so this management of the weapons laboratories by the University of California, with some little glitches and some modifications, is negotiated typically for a period of 5 years, and then in the past has always been renewed. But it has to go through a renewal process. So the renewal process is just in progress now, and I've spent a lot of time on this. I have spoken not only on my campus, but I've had a video made and the video has been used in Los Angeles at UCLA. And so I had this, what I call the opportunity, and I personally felt it a responsibility to speak up on this question.
And the other part is that you got it for chemistry, but you are not a chemist.
No, yes, that's quite correct. Well, that's a situation. I'm actually very comfortable with it. Chemists do use my work extensively, and they appreciate it. And they are, because they appreciate it, they are, without exception, very friendly towards me. They would be in a position extremely easily to embarrass me terribly, but nobody has ever tried that. I can tell you a slightly amusing story. The day after I received the prize, of course it was quite a sensation in my little town in Santa Barbara. So I walked across the campus, and two women students, are walking in the opposite direction. And they must have seen my picture somewhere, perhaps in the student newspaper. And so one of them turns around and comes back and says to me, are you the guy who won the Nobel Prize? And I said, yes, I am. And so they both gave me a very friendly hug, and then they kept going again. But then one came back again and said, do you mind? We are just going to a chemistry exam. Can we ask you a question? So yeah, I was in a very tight spot, right? So I said, well, try me. And I started praying very hard because I knew that the more elementary the questions would be, the less likely that I could answer them. So then this one young woman began to ask the question. And then I recognized an interesting fact. You see, the fact that I got the Nobel Prize in chemistry reflects the fact that at a certain theoretical level, chemistry and physics are very close to each other. But also at the lowest level, they're very close to each other. And these girls didn't really know the difference between physics and chemistry. So the question they had for me was, in fact, a physics question. Right. So I gave them a brilliant answer, and they were very impressed.
Is it so that these areas that you're getting the prize in, so to speak, maybe they do overlap more and more in the modern scientific world?
Well, yes. Yes, I would say yes, but I would not go along with some kind of world picture that all sciences will become unified. I think different sciences, and of course each science evolves over time, and but by and large they do have their own characteristics which differ. And I personally think that's for the good, because then science as a whole is enriched by this difference. Vive la différence.
If you advise students today at the campus, or people who would listen to this interview, who want to go into scientific research, what would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I would like to get to know the person a little bit before I offer any advice, because so promising young scientists are already rather exceptional people, and they are all different from each other.
Are there any specific quality that you have to have? Do you have to endure long nights of hard work and days?
Well, many, yes, and some no. So I wanted to make a caveat before I say anything, because what I say is perhaps broadly sensible, but there will be some cases where it would be absolutely the wrong advice. Let me think about this. I'd say perhaps 2 or 3 words of advice. Number one, be prepared for some great excitement and great personal rewards, but mostly disappointments. And you must last through the disappointments, and you have to be prepared for them. So that's one piece of advice. Another piece that I would offer is, but again, I would come back and say I know people from whom I would not say that. But in general, I think scientists have a great opportunity to combine their intellectual, or in some cases mechanical abilities on the one hand, with playing a useful role in society, in whether it's their town or their country, or whether it's global. And of course, scientists are a very global group, and of course, Nobel himself sort of highlights this globality of science. I think I myself I feel very much like a global citizen, and it's one of the best parts of my life. I mean, I'm just coming from 2 hours conversations with students from all over. You know the kind of students that come here, literally all over the world, and there's very few things that are more richer, right? A richer experience.
Professor, you said you know, the scientists feel like a citizen of the world often. And certainly one could describe you as a citizen of the world. You were born in Austria, but your childhood was very traumatic, as you had to flee during the Nazi takeover of Austria. Could you tell us something about that?
I had traumatic experiences in my childhood. The traumatic experiences were related with the so-called Anschluss, the joining of Austria to Germany during the Hitler time in 1938. Before that, looking back at least, I feel I had a generally good childhood. So my problems were, many people of course suffered under the Hitler regime. My family and I suffered like all other people who were in the same situation because of our religion. We were Jewish. Was that traumatic? Yes, it was terribly traumatic. I mean, the entire family was totally uprooted, destabilized, maltreated, I was thrown out of my school within a day, as I remember, and so there were things of that sort. Now, yeah, I want to say, first of all, that my parents did succeed to help both my sister and myself to emigrate. We both emigrated first to England. Unfortunately, they were unable to emigrate, and they were eventually murdered. Both my sister and I had a wonderful experience in England, a family that we had not ever encountered personally, but that had some business relationship with my father, took us into their home and treated us as family members, and they were absolutely wonderful. My sister eventually returned to Vienna after she married another Austrian emigre. I did not ever even think about returning. It was unbearable for me. So then I had bizarre experiences, here. In retrospect, right, I was threatened with extermination by the Austrians and Germans, but on the other hand, the English regarded me as a potential spy for the Germans, and interned me and thousands of others for close to 2 years. So I had bizarre experiences of this sort. Of course, compared to the horror of the people who had to stay behind, I was in my personal body, so to speak, I was fortunate. Now, the loss of my parents was, of course, a disaster.
Mm-hmm. So after the years in England, you went to Canada, you emigrated to Canada, or was sent to Canada. What happened there?
Well, in Canada, I, together with, I think approximately between 5,000 and 10,000 other people in similar situations, was put into an internment camp. You may wonder, how did they happen to have this internment camp ready? Well, they had it ready because they had arranged, the Canadians, with the British, at British request, to build these internment camps in order to be prepared for the thousands of German prisoners of war they expected. Well, the war didn't go that way. In the initial period, the little British expeditionary force in France, they were incredibly lucky to get away with their skin, and they came back to Britain and they didn't have, I think, a single prisoner came just back with their skin. So there were these camps waiting, and here were we, the suspected spy. So we were put in these camps, and I won't say right away we were treated very humanely. It was sometimes difficult because there were a few real Nazis in there, a small minority, but they were very, in the early phases of the war, right? The war was going splendidly for the Germans, and so whenever there was a great victory on the East Coast, right, these people would have their celebrations, and of course the rest of us got very upset about this. So there was some unpleasantness, nothing really serious. Nobody lost his life, but a few people lost a few teeth. Otherwise, there was a wonderful man there. I encountered several times in my life these people that just were there. This was a man by the name of Heckscher, a German art historian, and we encountered him as this dedicated person, very capable, very intelligent, and he was going to establish a school in camp for young people like me. He himself was about 20 years older, in his late 30s. And he inspired respect by everybody, including the officers, who treated him pretty much as their equal. He was not Jewish, but he had been, his family had been in that business of helping prisoner of war camp inmates for the second generation. His father had done this in the First World War, and so he took over the family tradition. So he established a very good camp school. There were some brilliant people in the camp. And so I divided my time roughly half to studying, and the other half we were given the opportunity, but not required, to do work of different kinds. So the work, the two kinds that I liked best was making camouflage nets for the British armed forces. That's very calming for the nerves. You stand there and you have sort of 3 movements that you learn in 5 minutes, and then you repeat them tens of thousands of times. And of course, you no longer know you're doing this, and you can dream or whatever, talk to your neighbor. And the other activity in Canada, you won't be surprised, was lumber work, cutting trees. Of course, I mean, from time to time we felt a little sorry for ourselves. I mean, why are we in this camp and why can't we go out and so on? But
when did you set your heart on science then?
Well, perhaps the most influential person was somebody I encountered after the Anschluss in Austria. So I was expelled from my school. There was some temporary arrangements, complicated. Let's skip them for a few months. The Anschluss was in March. Next September, some of us who had high grades in school were given the opportunity to enter into a newly organized, that's not quite correct, but let me just say, to enter into a reorganized school which was exclusively for Jewish students and with Jewish teachers. Many of them did not survive. The director was a physicist, and so he directed the school and he taught physics. Then the Latin teacher was arrested and didn't come back, and so the director, who had taken Latin in school, also taught Latin. He didn't know much Latin, but he came into class with the books that were supposed to be read, some of the classical Latin poets, Ovid and Virgil, and the dictionary. So he taught us from the books and the dictionary.
Which way was he influencing you to become a physicist?
Well, he taught physics also. He influenced me both very much as a just admirable personality generally, and inexplicably it was evident to me from the beginning that this man really knew science, really understood science. Then, about 10 years later, I found out that he had been an assistant of Einstein's. And he was an incredible man. I think without meeting him, and I had another very good teacher, a mathematician in the same school, without these two gentlemen, I probably would not have become a scientist. My interest before that time, I was very enthusiastic about something, but it wasn't science. It was Latin.
Latin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I would like to say thank you very much, and good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the questioning.
Thank you.